Black people aren't, I would say the majority of the time, making characters that are previously light-skinned, darker skin, and also giving them a variety of characteristics associated with the culture and aesthetics of them as black or brown people. They're not doing that as an attack on anybody. They're not doing that in a way to put down anybody else. They're doing it to uplift themselves and uplift the people around them that also look like them, that aren't often represented in the medium. It's out of love for the art, it's out of love for the medium of illustration, animation, and out of love for the property that they're enjoying and making this art of. But if you're to invert it in a way, like given the inverse of what is being suggested here, like, oh, they're doing it too, like, it doesn't seem to come from that as much. Because, like, you don't really need to look very far to find representation for white or light-skinned people in anime or cartoons. They're everywhere. There's been a lot of work done to make sure that more people of, you know, non-white descent are represented in media, specifically because there's a fucking drought of it, and it's just nice to see, you know?
Anyway, so what's happened is that there's been a lot of people pushing.
Sorry, I'm looking for the full clip
of
the one that's circulating about Asmongold.
Like Japanese audiences are finally starting to realize
oh, what the hell?
So yeah.
Bro, what the hell are we getting? How do we get to Gaza from here, bro? He's talking about so-called quote-unquote blackwashing of anime characters, which we did a video on ages ago, which was me reacting to, I think it might have been the first ever video I saw from Veritas Joe on YouTube. Now we're Umfi's on Twitter. It's a pretty good video. How the hell do we get to Gaza from there?
Japan just destroyed the Twitter police. Yeah, here we go. Let's see if we have any links here. And,
oh yeah, it was about the fucking Splatoon character.
yeah, take a look at this. This has been going on. So apparently this whole thing is from 2021. It has nothing to do with this current outcome. But a lot of people in Japan have gotten kind of annoyed by people fixing art by changing the skin color of it. So yeah.
What do you mean fixing it? Who's suggesting it's being quote-unquote fixed?
Check this out. We've got this Japanese artist over on Twitter, BKUB_comic, who's also the creator of Pop Team Epic. And as you can see, they made this Splatoon art that got over 114,000 likes, but got a different sort of reaction from that perpetually angry, always bizarre, terminal online crowd on Twitter. Yeah, along with crying about this, they also want to kill the guy over that art. Oh,
I see where the fixing thing is coming.
Really mean it. It's just a joke. Yeah, like
I think we're gonna have to kill this guy. I'm gonna be real. I actually think the people that do this should be instantly permabanned. I actually think like any comment like this should be an instant permaban. Like no questions asked, no what about anything, instant permaban, you're gone, no redeeming. I don't know why arrested too, probably not arrested.
You might be losing a lot of followers, Asmon, if that happens. So I don't know, there's a lot of death threats, or even like vague ones floating around online, and I gotta tell you, it's not exactly bipartisan. And in fact, when it comes to domestic terror and calls for it, that's bipartisan for sure in America. Mostly coming from the right-wing conservatives.
Worth people's legal control, legal money to do this, but it's a mental illness. Yeah, this is crazy. Of course, you shouldn't be able to say this. Is that okay to say?
Like, I don't care about the Splatoon thing.
It's not okay to threaten to kill anybody. That's the problem, right? You can't do it to anyone. It's actually really simple. They're gonna learn today. They would immediately change it. They're afraid of the repercussions. I've actually thought about like collectively going and like mass reporting people with my community for typing stuff like this, because I think it's a huge problem that the internet has. That I don't think that people realize that comments like this do lead to some bad actors going out of their way and doing things in real life. And a lot of content creators have
really. Asmon's actually correct about that, but usually from people with a really big megaphone. It's not usually going to be as much of an issue, though. Like morally speaking, you can make an argument that you shouldn't do it anyway. But generally speaking, it's often going to be people with really big platforms that are making in some way claims that could lead to people thinking that violent action should be done to a person or outright, calling for it. And then those people, like the fans of that larger influencer, going out and actually doing it. There's a lot of history of this, like with the Christchurch shooter and Ben Shapiro being one of the major people that he had watched and engaged with on Facebook. And, Ben Shapiro has for a long time fear-mongered over Muslims. There's also the myriad bomb threats that were sent to a variety of children's hospitals after Libs of TikTok made a big stink about trans people existing. So you can make an argument then, following Asmongold's logic, that this Twitter poster, I don't know how many followers they have, but once you get to a larger and larger size, that ends up becoming more and more of a potential problem that you might have to deal with as a creator. Like if you notice that you're fomenting a lot of violent thought in your community, and God forbid it actually ends up leading to something like Christchurch, you might want to like do some introspection, or like the bomb threats being sent to children's hospitals after Libs of TikTok is mad about the fact that they follow the standards of care that medical and mental health experts have decided are best practice for providing quality of life and safety for youth who have questions about their gender identity and it potentially differing from what was assigned at birth. You would hope it would cause some kind of introspection from the person who is spreading a lot of that and be like, maybe I shouldn't be talking about this shit that's like factually incorrect and fear-mongering over a bunch of people that aren't actually hurting anyone and that kind of thing. But that doesn't often happen. The difficulty there is that, once again, the majority of domestic terror that occurs in the United States of America, at least, it comes almost entirely from the far right, from conservatives. The Southern Poverty Law Center, they have statistics on domestic terror in the US. They break it down from right-wing, like, anti-government extremism, manosphere, like incel extremism. They break it down to Islamic extremism and all this kind of thing. And, like, in the ADL specifically, they segregate Islamic extremism and far-right extremism in the United States, where, like, 70%, give or take, is the far-right extremism, and then like 20%, give or take, is the Islamic extremism. But if you also then look into the political leans of Islamic extremists and those that often go out and do terror acts, you find out that their political ideology is also right-wing. So like it turns out that like 90+% of domestic terror that occurs in the United States of America is committed by people with far-right political ideology. And that's cause for concern if you are a right-winger, especially if you consider yourself to be moderate, because that's the farther end of the political spectrum that you happen to occupy. You're going to want to push back a lot on that. And it seems like it doesn't get a whole lot of pushback. Anytime a far-right lunatic goes out and shoots up a bunch of people, or even goes out and tries to, like what happened in Pennsylvania, assassinate the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, failing though, luckily for Donald Trump, that person was right-wing. Like the people there, the right-wingers online will just immediately pretend that the shooter is a left-winger. They'll immediately pretend that the shooter is in some way one of the out-groups that the right-wing at the time doesn't like, instead of understanding the fact that this guy was a Republican voter that was right-wing, had like a history of like having some left-wing politics, some right, but like was a Republican. They'll make excuses for it happening in order to blame their opposition, which is the left broadly and also the Democrats. It's the same time any kind of school shooting happens in the modern day. The perpetrator by the right wing is immediately called out to be so-called transgender. Nowadays seems to be the very popular thing for right-wingers to do. And then it turns out that it's not actually a trans shooter. The majority of shooters are cisgender, heterosexual white men in the United States of America. The actual data, the factual information shows. And then that becomes a way for the right wing to kind of hide from the fact that, once again, the majority of domestic terror that occurs in the United States of America with political motives comes from the far right, It's just a way to provide cover for the fact that the fear-mongering, the constant violent rhetoric and imagery that comes from the right wing as it pertains to immigrants, as it pertains to Muslims, as it pertains to trans people, any group of people that the right has decided is persona non grata, like there's a whole bunch of evidence to suggest that there is a right-wing violence problem, both in rhetoric and in action, and trying to pretend that, or muddy the waters, like in the immediate aftermath of a tragedy like that happening, is a method to, one, drive more hatred toward the out group that they don't like by falsely claiming that shooters are trans or whatever, and then two, to cover their own asses for the fact that, once again, factually stating FBI statistics show that the majority of domestic terror that occurs in the United States is right-wing, if there is a political lean involved. Like, it's heinous, and it's evil, and it shouldn't happen, but that's where the majority of it is coming from, so says the data, so... If Asmongold understands that, a lot of people in his audience hopefully will as well, and then maybe they'll be able to understand that, like, a lot of these right-wing lunatics are also guilty of this, and not just people upset about the fact that a cartoon squid person has a lighter skin tone than the original, which, that being the case to begin with could be racially motivated, sure, but it could also just be, like, their color picking wasn't that good. Or, like, maybe the screen that they're operating on isn't, like, displaying colors in the way that they might be seen by other people on different screens, all this kind of shit. There's a whole bunch of reasons why this could happen, and immediately jumping to racial motivation being the reason why, I can see why people would be sensitive to it, but, like, I don't know that I care too much, particularly. And, like, we've gone over the so-called blackwashing thing a whole bunch in the past. I'm rambling at this point. This isn't even what we're trying to look at.
Yeah, chat me on a little mass report adventure. Yeah, in my opinion, I think if you ever see somebody type something like this, because this is
but I'm here for the
let me
Gaza
see.
stuff. Where the
Regarding
fuck does that come
I received
from?
a response that this was racism against black people because the character's skin is depicted as lighter than in the original work. I also believe that if Lita were human, he would be black. Sorry, my coloring skills are poor, so it's not accurate.
Never
Now,
make people like this happy. Because
Yeah,
they're
so
happy.
like, I think that's a fair retort. I'm not gonna disagree with the fact that some people might be sensitive about the issue, in many ways rightfully so, to the point where they might immediately jump to conclusions of it being racially motivated where it might not be, and then might act out of pocket in ways that they might regret or may have thought not to if they weren't immediately, affected by a variety of other kinds of racism in their life. Or they could just be wrong,
other Japanese people were not having this apology, responding and saying things like, don't worry, they're doing it too, and posting these examples.
Yeah, exactly.
They respond saying, this
Yeah,
is
so
racism
that
against Japanese people and
retort
Japanese
is
culture.
really stupid because there's obviously an asymmetry here. The comparison being made here is incredibly one-sided in terms of the fact that the majority of characters in anime, while they may be Asian or of Asian descent and usually Japanese, the skin tones involved, especially because a lot of this comes from manga where it's just white paper with black ink on it, the skin tones are ambiguous, but in that case, they appear to be very light and very white, just because of the color of the paper. Obviously, in a variety of Asian countries, in Japan, Korea, fucking China, and then, you get to the Indian subcontinent, etc., you've got a lot of varieties of skin tone, and you have a spectrum of lighter and then darker skin people. But even in colored media, in anime, a lot of the people are not depicted with very dark skin, nor are there a lot of black people or African people generally being represented in media either. The overwhelming majority are going to be white or white passing people. So usually when people are going to be making a white or Japanese person with light skin character have darker skin or have a variety of aesthetics that are associated with black culture, it's usually going to be black people who are wanting to see themselves represented in media where they might not otherwise, or might want to see a character that they really like from a piece of media be representative of their person, of who they are, and the people that they, live with and love and grow up with that don't usually get a lot of representation in that media, be represented in that way. It's a nice artistic expression of, that part of their life. And it's usually born out of the fact that there isn't a lot of representation for black and brown people to begin with in that media. The difficulty with when, they make black or darker skinned people lighter, and the reason why there's asymmetry involved here is because of the fact that usually you're going to be taking a black character or a darker skinned character in that media who's already incredibly, not represented. You're going to be taking that character and then making them light skin. For what reason? It's possible it could be such an innocent reason as, I just, wanted to draw this person as the skin color I am, and I happen to be light skin or white or whatever. And, that's fine and well within your rights. I'm not going to get mad at you for doing that, but you can't be surprised when people look at you a certain type of way and question your motives behind it. If you're very clear about it, given that people are going to be a little bit more sensitive about it, given racism and whatnot, as long as you're clear about it and that is what it is, there's going to be people that still hate on you. But you've said your piece, and I think a lot of people would be it's kind of weird given everything that I've just talked about before, but what it is, whatever, I don't really care. But there are also going to be people that are specifically going out of their way to find black characters in often anime or even other Western animation or cartoons even, and making them white in response as a reaction to the very innocent, I want to see myself represented in a media that a person like me, in this case, the hypothetical black or brown person, doesn't often get represented in. The person then making that character like that white is often in response to the fact that, black people are making characters that are not black. And then it's usually going to have racial undertones because of that. It's going to have racist undertones because of that. Because for whatever reason, people will get offended at Deku or Tanjiro being represented as black or brown if, the person in question is not black or brown. And then in response to that offended reaction they get, because for whatever reason they see it as for one, offensive, or for two, an attack against them, they'll in response be oh, well, what if I do it to you? That's not to say that that's what the previous Splatoon character artist was doing. It doesn't seem like it is, given what they said, but that does end up happening, and that's obviously, with racist intent. So the claim being made that they're doing it too is not the same, because black people aren't making, I would say the majority of the time, or even brown people aren't making characters that are previously light skin, darker skin, and also giving them a variety of characteristics associated with the culture and aesthetics of them as black or brown people. They're not doing that as an attack on anybody. They're not doing that in a way to put down anybody else. They're doing it to uplift themselves and uplift the people around them that also look like them, that aren't often underrepresented in the medium. It's out of love for the art, it's out of love for the medium of illustration, animation, and out of love for the property, you know, that they're enjoying and making this art of. But if you're to invert it in a way, like given the inverse of what is being suggested here, like, oh, they're doing it too, like it doesn't seem to come from that as much. Because, like, you don't really need to look very far to find representation for white or light-skinned people in anime or cartoons. They're everywhere. There's been a lot of work done to make sure that more people of, you know, non-white descent are represented in media, specifically because there's a fucking drought of it, and it's just nice to see, you know? There's also plenty of darker-skinned Japanese folk, yeah. But like I said, I think a lot of the difficulty when it comes to anime specifically and skin tones is, like, I'm sure there's a lot of colorism in some people's minds when it comes to, you know, being lighter or darker skinned, as is the case in a variety of other places because white supremacy is a bitch and you hate to see it, you know, taint other things and other cultures that don't directly interface with it. But, like, a lot of that also, in my view, might come from the fact that in manga rather, the standard print is black and white. So the lights are going to be represented by the absence of ink, and it's usually going to be on white paper. And then the darker colors are going to be represented by ink and a variety of shading techniques. And depending on what the artist is trying to represent and their proficiency in representing it when it comes to the medium of illustration, it might be difficult for them to include a darker skin tone and make it cohesive to the rest of the art style and so on and so forth. To the point where, like, there might be characters that are actually darker skinned in the manga, but, like, it might not be worth the extra effort or whatever. And for some manga, they do it. They shade in such a way that represents a darker skin tone. Like, there's a whole bunch of shit that can go into that when it comes to the actual mechanic practice of illustration and the medium through which you're doing it, in this case, ink and paper, that can, you know, throw a bunch of different things into the mix that you might not otherwise think of, a lot of nuances. But it's also the case that there's a deficit of representation for darker skinned people in a variety of different media properties and whatnot. Anyway.
Responding and saying things like, don't worry, they're doing it too. And posting these examples.
Yeah, exactly.
A response saying, this is clearly racism towards Japanese people and Japanese culture. The people who make those edits should really apply for a job over at Ubisoft. Another response saying,
well, yeah.
Okay, so that's a stupid-ass claim. The suggestion here that it's potentially, quote-unquote, racist toward Japanese people and Japanese culture for a Japanese character with light skin being made to be darker-skinned and have a variety of, in the case of, like, the Tanjiro edit, the twisted hair and whatnot, a variety of different aesthetics commonly associated with black culture. That idea that that's racist is born out of a reactionary response to, you know, black people being upset, I believe rightfully so, about a character that is black or brown in a piece of media that is already an underrepresented type of person in that media, then being made to not be black anymore. Like, you can understand how, if you are the minority in that instance, and there's already so few representations of people that look like you, a person going out of their way, and it seems like once again, with that Splatoon artist, they weren't. They tried to clear that up. But a person that might be going out of their way to make a dark-skinned person light-skinned or even white, that can seem as more of a racist attack or have racial motivation, whereas picking out, like, from the trough of 5 billion white characters, one of them that you really like, and then making art of them that looks like you by making the skin darker and making a variety of, like, the hairstyle different and all this kind of stuff, that's not going to be seen as much of an attack because, like, there's, like, not even anything being affected here because there's, like, a billion other characters that are light skin or white. You get what I mean? It's like if you were to have 100 people of a particular culture and then, like, 10 of them get assimilated into a different culture. That would feel like, oh, they're trying to, like, get rid of our culture. That's how it can feel. It's not even to say that that might be the case. But then if you have, like, a culture that contains 100,000 people, and then 10 of those people become assimilated into a different culture, you can see how, proportionally speaking, that wouldn't be seen or have the potential to be seen as much of an attack on that culture. You get what I'm saying? This is the exact same here.
This is clearly racism towards Japanese people and Japanese culture. The people who make those edits should really apply for a job over at Ubisoft. Another response saying,
well, yeah, exactly. This is what I saw, right? It's like it depends on the lighting and the character's color. Like,
this is really funny to me. I think, as a person with the positions that I have on the topic, this is hilarious. I find this very funny. Now, of course, this is in response to people that, in my mind, there's a lot of explanation as to why people might be more sensitive about it. And in that way, a lot of those reasons I think are understandable. This is in direct response to people who are upset about it and is making fun of it. That I don't like. The idea that Obama was whitewashed throughout his presidency just because of the lighting is a funny idea to me. I think that's funny, generally. Like, separated from the broader context here.
It's like if you know anybody with like dark skin, you'd know that a different lighting. Sometimes, and this is especially true with people that are like Asian, who like basically never go outside. In a lot of types of lighting, they look like white people, and then other lighting, they look like they have darker skin, like Asians usually do. Like that's what happens. And so it's just it's what's really funny to me about this.
And once again, like when it comes to that Splatoon artist, it could be the case that the color that they picked might have been a result of the fact that the screen that they're looking at and the settings for it differ from other screens that people are seeing, in that the skin tone on the character, on the reference they were using, might appear lighter on that screen than others, especially if they're not like specifically color picking, which you might not always want to do because you want to have a more cohesive color palette. With the rest of the colors at hand, you're going to want to get as close as possible, and like going super on one end of the spectrum or the other, like, is questionable, obviously. But like that could be another, explanation as to why. And it's the same when it comes to like photographs.
All the time is that in a lot of times where people do this, what they end up doing is they end up self-reporting that you.
I didn't expect to like be going through this. I was curious about the Gaza takes, but I mean, I guess we're here.
Any friends that have dark skin tones, and you're just doing this to be performative to find something to complain about. Because if you did, you'd know that this is a natural outcome of lighting. Yeah, it's another self-report.
Hey, whitewashed Obama, and that one got over 83,000 likes. Yours response over 36,000 likes. That reads, racism against black people is a white person's problem, so don't drag unrelated Japanese people into it. If you want to do atonement, then do it between white people and black people.
Keep us out of it.
Have the ability to change the color of their bodies. Study National Geographic and try again. Once again.
I thought only a squid can change the color of their body, but I could be wrong. I really am not sure.
This is just a few examples of many, many Japanese people defending BKUB.
Racism against blacks is a white person's problem. So I can understand that they might be saying, like, historically speaking, when it comes to black Americans, it's white Americans at the time that were doing a lot of the racism and the history of it. But the idea that any person of any country of origin or ethnicity or religion or skin color, like, aren't ever having the capacity to be racist against another is absurd. Like, anybody can be racist against somebody else. It's just a matter of how much actual impact on a person's life that racism is going to have. So in the instance of the United States of America, black people are disproportionately targeted in material ways by racism that white people are not. There can certainly be black people who are just racist against white people, but usually that doesn't result in laws being passed that make it harder for black people to get a job, or harder for black people to be able to get into a college, or harder for black people to be able to rent or buy a home, and all this kind of thing, not to mention a variety of laws that are passed that make it so that black majority areas, like towns, cities, etc., end up being underfunded. And not even to mention like the highway system in the United States of America that was through like the actual thoughts and opinions of one of the architects of the highway system, literally made to make a cut between the black majority areas and the white majority ones. There's actually like lines that were drawn via highways that operate to that effect. And you might not see that as overtly racist because on paper it's not. They were just like, oh, that's where we're going to put the highway, so whatever, fuck it. But it turns out, like, the dude was literally racist and interested in cutting people away from each other in that way, and, like, essentially keeping all the black people in one area because he didn't like them or whatever, you know? Like, there's a whole bunch of ways that the racism can actually materially impact black people in the United States of America that a lot of racism against white people just isn't doing. Like, it's still not good. Like, you still shouldn't do it. It's still mean and rude, and it can make a person feel bad about themselves, sure. But, like, there's not, like, a conglomerate of black people in the legislature that are trying to pass bills making white people's lives more difficult. Often, when there's a conglomerate of black people in the legislature, they're trying to pass bills to undo a lot of the oppression that black people and brown people face in the United States that were put there to begin with by white people. You know, because this country was founded at a time when black people, at the time African people, were stolen from Africa, brought to America, and were horrifically abused and tortured as slaves. Like, the idea that there isn't an ingrained problem there of racism is absurd. And there's been a lot of work to try to undo that and reach equality, but we're still not fully there yet, clearly. But anyway, so, like, the idea that it's specifically a white person's problem, so don't drag unrelated Japanese people into it. For one, you're on a public platform that is frequented by people of a variety of countries and cultures. So the idea that just because you happen to be living in Japan, but you're interfacing with black people, like you're in a global marketplace of ideas at that point. These are things that you're going to have to interface with. Like, you can try to form your little enclaves in a public forum, but you can only do so much, and I would also question your reason for doing doing so outside of the fact that like you're trying to keep people that are like outright hateful against you out of it, etc., etc. Like it's a public forum. And our economy is globalized as well. Our culture is globalized as well. We share culture from a variety of different people. The entire reason why this is a discussion to begin with is because black people who aren't typically living in Japan, especially before anime was even able to be viewed by Americans living in America, the only reason they're able to enjoy anime that is a large product of Japan is because of that globalization of culture, of a variety of different manga and anime being transported over to the US and being able to be viewed that way, and then eventually through the internet, it being able to be streamed and read and seen the world over, as long as you have access to the internet. So like the culture is globalized as well, so there's going to be a variety of things related to people engaging with your culture that you may not be privy to, but it might behoove you to learn about because it's going to be something that comes up. Like you don't live in a homogenous society online in a public forum that anybody can access.
Just a few examples of many, many Japanese people defending BKUB.
Both?
Oftentimes
Okay.
in the past, Japanese people seemed reluctant to defend each other in these sort of situations, but now it seems like many Japanese people are sick of these Twitter cops, and that's certainly the case outside of Japan as well. In this video, I mostly showcase responses from Japanese people. However, people from all across the world have largely been mocking the Twitter police. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning in, and if you enjoyed my brief coverage, consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.
This was so funny to me. Like, I'm gonna be honest, I think this is so fucking funny that people are getting mad about this. And it's like, how do you, like, and I'm very glad that at the end of the day, I'll link you guys a video. Like, it's a 2-minute video, but this has pretty much covered everything that I was gonna say. Yeah, give it a like, and link it. Yeah, I can. I watch your Highs videos all the time, especially recently. So make sure to give them some support. And I see this. And
I know
like,
nothing about this person, by the way. The YouTube channel. Could be a dumbass. Seems like their opinions are kind of dumb. Seems like a drama channel broadly, which I will never trust because it's just a rot in the broader context of YouTube and media creation. But, you know, I don't know anything about this person.
Being told what to do by people that self-identify as their mental illnesses, right? Like, I just don't want to be told what to do. I don't want to be told what to think. I don't want to be judged. I don't want to be, talked down to. I just don't want to deal with that, right? I don't want to deal with the person telling me what to do. Like, it doesn't really matter, like, what the reasoning is for it or, like, whether you think that you're in the right or not. Just stop telling me what to do, period. That's it.
So, like, if somebody... I'm not saying Asmongold is going around calling, hypothetically, black people the N-word. I don't think he's doing that. I hope he's not. I don't have any evidence that he would, and I'm not suggesting that he is. But in this hypothetical, if somebody tells you not to call people the N-word, are you going to get mad about it? Like, you're told what to do all the time in society. It's just a matter of, like, the severity of it, right? Like, that's a severe example. When it comes to, like, oh, I don't like to be told what to do, don't tell me not to make a black character white. Like, that's not as a severe of an issue, but I'm still curious as to your motivations. I feel like most people, if they get like even an outsized amount of pushback from people that think you're with racial intent making a black character white or lighter skinned, if they're coming at you with that criticism, I feel like you should just be able to like, yeah, this wasn't my intention, my apologies, and then you move on. Like, I feel like at that point, like the haters there might be some hangers on, but like eventually they'll stop giving a shit and you'll just plateau back to your normal engagement. And as long as you don't make it a pattern, or even if you do decide to be, and you're going to be putting yourself in a position by doing it, decide to make a black character white, there are going to be people that are mad about you no matter what you do. It's just a matter of like doing as much as you can to try to clear it up. If you're not doing it to try to get people mad, you know what I mean? Like, there's always going to be somebody mad at you about something. It's just a matter of like how you respond to it and how the person mad at you has described what they're mad about and the level to which you can understand each other's position, I guess.
Don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me what to say. Unless I'm breaking the law or threatening harm on somebody, like I said earlier, just leave people the fuck alone, right? And 15 flags in their bio. As I said, the nightmare rotation of having the Palestine flag and the trans or the gay flag in your bio.
Oh boy.
I think that they should do something.
So I think this is where the Gaza thing comes up. So we got from a conversation about race issues and people making analogies between two things without understanding the context behind either, and therefore misapplying the amount of harm that one act could potentially do compared to another, and like completely misunderstanding where either one might come from, etc., etc. You go from that, just like a lack of understanding around racial issues, and media that is in many ways crafted to be like, oh, these crazy black and brown people are at it again. They're mad that a black or brown character was made white, but they make white characters black all the time, blah, blah, blah. There's obviously a racial component to that, even if you engage with it thinking that you're not having a racial component of it. Like, that's the crux of it. Like, you can make fun of people for, like, being hypocrites in that way, but if you do that, you're not really understanding where a lot of characters that are white being made black by black people is usually coming from. It's usually out of love for the character in the medium and wanting to be represented in a media where they're not usually, whereas the opposite, making one of the incredibly few black characters in whatever medium white, there's a little bit more to question there when it comes to your motives. You could simply be doing it innocently, but you could also be doing it maliciously. And there's a little bit more to dissect there. And as the artist in that instance, you're going to want to be a lot more careful about making your intentions known. Like, no, this is not racially motivated. I just really like the character, and I was curious about designing them in a way that looks more like me, a non-black person, and a brown person, yada, yada, yada. Like, people will still give you shit for it, but it is what it is. But you go from that to now, you know, oh, the transgender flag in the bio and the Palestine flag in the bio. Aren't these people so crazy simply for the assumptions you're making about them having those flags in their bio? Like, I feel like you're letting it affect you a little bit too much. I know it's a broader criticism of the comments that you might read outside of the fact that the flags are in the bio. Like, there are a lot of dumbasses out there with like a billion different flags in their bio. They're like, hey, we gotta break the two-party system by voting for a candidate that has no chance of winning and blah, blah, blah. And Mao Zedong would have done X, Y. Like, I can see that. But like, people who have flags in regards to like the country they're from or countries that they support against an ongoing genocide, or like flags that they identify with when it comes to any kind of quality about themselves or characteristic about themselves that they want to express and be proud of, like being trans or gay or whatever. Like, those don't really seem relevant outside of the broader meme that I've described.